Civilization 7's anniversary patch update just dropped. It's got some great new changes. Here's everything you need to know. Let's kick off with the free leader rolling out right now in update 132. It's Gilgamesh, a leader for his allies and a diplomatic militarist. His preference, though, is perhaps to just have one best bro. Starting from the top, as Gilgamesh, you will gain an extra +2 war support when you have one and only one ally. Beyond that, ally number irrespective, in combat, your units can earn influence equal to half of the defeated enemy unit's combat strength, so there's a way to generate influence on the go here. The last parts of his once immortal, twice divine ability are all about diplomatic actions, or endeavors, as Civilization 7 labels them. Here you'll have all of your basic endeavors automatically unlocked. Your allies can support your endeavors for free. And in the middle there, endeavors with allies don't count towards the one active endeavor per type rule that exists across Civilization 7. And this is really fascinating, because the last parts apply to allies, i.e. all of them, any number, not just one. So, you could go for the best bros strategy. Use the +2 war support from having just one ally, in conjunction, of course, with your military units separately gaining influence when they slay an enemy, and actually Gilgamesh's mementos as well, which I believe will heavily lean into this strategy too. Or, alternatively, you could, say, run a massive map, a massive campaign, with the maximum number of players. Befriend an ally, anyone you come across, and theoretically run a stupid number, maybe even more stupid than something like 5, 6, 7 of each basic endeavor simultaneously. Regardless of how memey you want to play him, I think that Gilgamesh is going to need a lot of influence. He's really going to want to generate a lot of that in any possible way. So influence buildings, attributes, wonders, even all of the above are probably going to be key here to driving a Gilgamesh build, depending on how you want to play him. Let's move on to some of the headlining game feature updates. The first is one of the few UI upgrades, and maybe my second favorite one actually, because the one we're going to discuss next is arguably a little bit more interesting. Nonetheless, the UI is a topic of much criticism, and today Firaxis have introduced nested tooltips to Civilization 7. If you're unfamiliar, it's kind of like tooltipception, tips within tips. Anyway, they say, we're upgrading our tooltips so that concepts like warehouses or wonders can be inspected to get a new tooltip with a brief explanation of that concept. They're also graphically refreshing the affected tooltips, and so far that's technology and civics choosers, those like selection screens, as well as the settlement production lists. Firaxis are considering ongoing, by the sounds, big changes to how Civ 7's happiness mechanic works. And in this update, we get a look at a few bundled together into a fairly familiar looking, at first anyway, appeal lens to identify particularly happy tiles. This will make spotting natural wonders easier as well, and more importantly, you'll be able to spot the difference between the, in Civ 7, newly differentiated, charming, or breathtaking tiles. And this is, as you might be able to tell if you've had some experience with, say, Civilization 6, beyond just a lens. Historically, tiles in Civ 7 had their appeal set to a binary option: yes, no, appealing or unappealing. If the tile was deemed appealing, it would grant happiness, and that amount would scale by age. From now on though, after today's update, happiness on tiles does not scale by age. Instead, that charming versus breathtaking appeal distinction between the two is used to adjust the happiness gain. Charming tiles provide a base happiness, +1 happiness when improved, and breathtaking tiles provide +2 when improved. Those unappealing tiles will continue to provide no happiness. You should expect to see the word appeal used instead of happiness when referring to abilities that used happiness yield or natural happiness too, perhaps indicating a broader shift. Now we're going to delve a little deeper, extra for experts, if you will, Only the kids who went to school in the 2000s, early 2000s in New Zealand will get that reference. Anywho, we're going to take a look at the patch notes. I'm mostly going to stick to the order they're presented in, except firstly, I think we should take a look at the CIVS. 3 civilizations in particular have been significantly reworked, with loads of notes from Firaxis about the how and why. We're going to start with the Mughals, their unique ability. This has changed a buff. It is now plus 100% to all gold yields. It used to be plus 75%. The developers note here as well a point of interest. They say that they wanted to lean into the asymmetrical nature of the Mughal ability harder and bring it up to a clean 100%. And I, for one, really like it when civilizations are distinct and there's some clear asymmetry. Moving along, they also changed the unique improvement, traditions, civic tree. I mean, really a massive, sweeping developer note here. The Stepwell improvement provides +2 food. Used to provide +2 gold and +2 food from adjacent farms. The +2 food, by the way, that adjacency remains. It's just the base yield has changed, now providing food. Firaxis wanted to tilt them a little bit more into the food and rural aspects. On the traditions front, for the Mughals, we largely see debuffs. So, previously, they used to get 25% gold towards purchasing anything. That's now just 10%. They used to get +1 food and gold on farms and plantations. It was an adjacency bonus that worked between the two. So farms got it for each adjacent plantation. Plantations get it for each adjacent farm. That has changed now to just provide the food part of it. So no longer providing gold. Finally, on the traditions front here, we see another little bit of a scaling back. The final tradition that was changed provides +2 gold on quarters with walls. Previously, it wasn't actually quite working as they intended. It counted any district with 2 buildings instead of quarters. And I have to admit, I'm actually just learning this for the first time. Have I just never played the Mughals? Maybe I haven't. Civics Tree, Gardens of Paradise Tier 1. You can purchase wonders with gold, but they are more expensive. 150%. Tradition, previously you can purchase wonders with gold. So what they've changed here in the notes is they've said you could always buy them with gold once you have this in. Now they're going to be more expensive, right? So this is again another debuff, but really interesting. I didn't even know they could do that. What a noob I am. The second civilization that's changed, and don't worry, the next 2 are actually much more succinct than the Mughals. We have Dai Viet with a developer note. Sometimes we just like to buff stuff, and certainly that plays out. Both their unique ability and their unique settler have had their culture yield scaled up massively. They used to deliver 5 culture. For the unique ability, it was when you make a fort, receive 5 for every urban pop in the settlement. Now you'll get 25. For their unique settler, you used to get 5 culture for every tropical tile within 3 tiles of the city center. Now you'll get 25. And of course, that stuff will scale by game speed. Overall, a nice wee buff for Dai Viet and some extra culture potential, some surge potential too. And lastly, the French Empire here, where they're sort of fudging the numbers a bit. They've added a lot of military stuff. Militarist diplomatic. They say they've replaced the militarist attribute for cultural, so the French Empire is now cultural. Due to their focus on happiness and government, it made the diplomat side clearer. But Firaxis argue the rest was kind of difficult, with their bonuses split between combat and culture. As well as adding a tradition slot to the French Empire's final civic and changing a little bonus to one of the traditions, the developers note here, quote, "As we ramp up towards releasing some bigger changes and making attributes matter more in some contexts, we might adjust a few more CIVS in future updates. We plan to be very judicious about these shifts," end quote. Now let's delve a little deeper into the patch notes, starting with gameplay. Coastal Raid, something more significant that they teased in yesterday's developer diary. Goodness me, the developer diaries. So Coastal Raid action for naval units now behaves more like pillage. Naval units can still coastal raid the tile they're on, as well as adjacent, but they no longer have the option to pillage. Coastal Raid can be used to activate discoveries at range, as well as capture districts. Coastal raiding provides the yields based on the tile that is actually being raided, matching that of pillaging. Previously, it would just give gold and health. And finally here for this part, Coastal Raid now also benefits from abilities that would increase the yield of pillaging. So it behaves in a much more similar way to that of the standard pillage action. To support these coastal changes, they've also changed some sort of supporting stuff, mostly around Iceland, actually. You can see that the naval units granting culture equal to 50% of pillage yields and healing. This used to grant culture equal to 50% of just the gold that you gained. And also their unique heavy naval unit now grants science equal to 25% of pillage yields and healing. Has 3-side. Still has the same 3-side, but it used to grant, the coastal rating used to grant science equal to 25% of the gold. So generally, probably scaling up there, I have to imagine. Overall, some more clarifications around naval gameplay. As far as the AI changes go, we see a lot of change around behavior and trying to make it more specialized. In the patch notes, we'll actually get to learn quite a bit about exactly how it works. The good news here as well, all leaders will befriend independents slightly less often. You might actually get a chance to befriend them if you find them a little later on. Also, the behavior around the military sabotage action should work a little better. Specific behaviors have been tweaked across the board to support leader biases in specific behaviors. Ben Franklin, Edward Teach, Harriet Tubman, Napoleon, and actually many more. Moreover, on the AI behavior front, leaders with city-state-centered gameplay will more properly suzerain or incorporate them. Leaders with personas that have multiple personalities will be more differentiated between those said personalities. And finally, civs that have specific starting biases have been adjusted to better support that in their gameplay. Think Greece, Tonga, Prussia, America, so on. They're all listed here. I'll show you the full notes on screen, but I won't read them word for word because I don't know what the point in that would be unless there's really huge demand for that. Let me know in the comments below. And I will, of course, link the full patch notes in the description down below. On the economic front here in the patch notes, Firaxis make a point of specifying that as they ramp up to big change, they're trying to unify language to make things clearer and occasionally tweaking abilities to better suit or better fit the language. And there's an example of that just here. The overarching change is that they've adjusted quote-unquote rural district to just rural on various tooltips. One example of a kind of simplification and unification of language. The other thing that stood out to me in the economic patch notes is that the production adjacency bonuses for wonders, factories in the modern age has been added. There are some other tweaks here, relatively minor in my view. And on the military and miscellaneous front here, generally we're just seeing bug fixes. A couple of note, one because it made me laugh, and the other because I've ran into it before. Communism no longer spawns naval ranged units, instead spawning the land ranged units that it should when you complete the civic tree. Also here, military naval units can now properly capture a fortified tile when you've decimated, pillaged the buildings on said tile. So a nice little tweak, another, I mean, it's not really a buff because it's a fix, but another adjustment to military gameplay, which, let's be real, actually, over the last few updates, has seen significant improvement. Shout out to Boat Games. Let's keep going with that. The user interface received some extensive changes. Of course, we've already talked about things like appeal and the appeal lens at the start of the video. Most of the rest tend to be bug fixes. It's nice to see the Civilopedia receive an entry for trade range, city range, trade range, who can or can't, what goes where. That sort of stuff needs to be, I think, better fronted in Civilization 7. Maybe even a lens for that would, extra UI capabilities, I should say, for that would be a better idea too. For now, they've added an entry in the Civipedia and loads of controller fixes and supports, one specific to the Steam DECK, the rest of them seemingly about console gameplay. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, Jumbo, these are just boring patch notes. Well, I'm pleased to say that the general notes, actually, pretty good. Here, actually quite a few things I'd like to highlight, and I already have. Added turns until next celebration underneath the government icon in the heads-up display. Nice to have that front-footed. Always handy when you're doing events and stuff like that. They've also added a red outline around the unit flag of hostile city-states. This used to just be for hostile independent powers. When clicking on your leader portrait in a diplomatic menu, it'll open back up onto the tab you were last on. Nice to have a little bit of memory there. And finally, my personal highlights. They've made improvements to late-game performance, as well as multiplayer stability. When it comes to text and tooltips, of course, we've already talked about the nested tooltips. Here are largely fixes. They've added some help to diplomacy tabs, government screens. The Pantheon menu is no longer mostly empty and missing info at the start of a game. And they've added tooltips tabs within the diplomacy panel as well. Lastly here, there are a couple of nice audio tweaks, including an audio notification for when cities are converted to a new religion. And that, my friends, brings us to the end. Now, don't forget, the Test of Time update is scheduled for Northern Hemisphere spring, so honestly, maybe in the next couple months. That one will allow us to play as one civilization. It will rework victories and add triumphs in place of legacy paths. Of course, if you saw yesterday's video, you're already well across that. If you didn't, I'll link it down below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. As always with patch days, things can be a little bit busted, things like mods. If you're playing on Steam, you can backtrack to the last version, the legacy version. And if you're not playing on Steam, you might have to wait a little bit longer for the patch update to reach your system. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next time.